Yeah, I don't even have to ask opposed. Okay, public comment, 3 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone who would like to comment?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Legislative and Strategic Planning Committee. Gary Floyd.
1 second. We're going to get your mic on.
I should remember that. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Legislative and Strategic Planning Committee. Gary Cloyd, Transit Advocate. I wanted to point out a couple things this morning before you get to your legislative update. Congratulations once again to the everybody at HART on the FTA grant. This is something significant as you go into your works up in Tallahassee. I wanted to commend the new government relations director and everybody that's been helping her up in Tallahassee. I see by the list you guys have been pretty busy the last 60 to 90 days getting the point across to Representative Toledo and State Senator Cruz on getting some allocated funding. And what this grant will do for you as you look into the March 2020 that's outlined in your update makes practical sense, and it gives you some bargaining and leverage power. So I appreciate that, and good luck to you guys, and thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, any more public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will then move into the legislative update with the presentation. Lorena Hardwick.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. Lorena Hardwick, Government Relations. Just wanted to start off with, we were in Tallahassee on November 12th and 13th with our Holland and Knight team of Kim Case and Mark Delagon. We have two legislative asks. One here that you see is a radio communications appropriations request. It's $600,000 that we have Senator Cruz and Representative Toledo with two bills going through the House and the Senate for this appropriations request. This is a request that will enhance further communications project that HART has going on for our bus systems and bus communication systems. And we are, again, working with our team to ensure that we can get this $600,000 to help us obtain the radio equipment. The second request is the Uniform Public Servant Protection Act. This is Part A of this request. Currently, what we are trying to do is working with our ATU and really being supportive of them and protecting our bus operators. We are looking at a language amendment to ensure that we can bring the penalty for assault on our bus operators from a misdemeanor in the first degree to a third degree felony. We have Senator Perry, who is the chair of the Civil Justice Committee, and Representative Beltran as sponsors for this particular amendment. Part B of our quest to ensure that our bus operators have safety measures around them is we are modeling after a congressional act, which in your packet you would see that on page 29, but we'd like to model that here locally at the state. And what we're looking for is a addition to section 341.061, which is the transit safety standards. That would allow for the administrative code for FDOT to be amended. And in amending that, we are asking that all state systems, transit systems, require posting notification of, if you assault a bus operator, this is what happens. We're asking that around the state that we provide training for all of our bus operators, de-escalation training and any other training that would be beneficial to them. And we're also asking that assault mitigation, such as the barriers, like HART has already, we're about 80% done with our barrier installation. So this is something that's statewide. Again, we have been working with and supporting our ATU members in this endeavor. So we'd like to pass this on a state level. And as you can see, with HART, we already have many of these items that have been installed, and we are adhering to these. And I have spoken to many of the transit agencies across the state. So they either are installing barriers or will be installing barriers in the next two fiscal years. So it's not something that we expect to see any pushback from. And this is just a quick overview of the legislators that we met with in Tallahassee, in addition to all the different staff and their committees. And as you all know, we did receive the $4.3 million from the FTA grant, which was fantastic. Our initial request was of $21 million. Obviously, we're still very excited and ecstatic that we do have this 4.3 because it will help us replace some of our critical needs on the fleet side. And we currently have filed an RFI with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for the Volkswagen mitigation plan. As of right now, they were just looking for requests from around the state, and this is part of the 2016, there were some violations for the Clean Air Act. So this is part of the monies that are going out to agencies and for us to take advantage of that. So as soon as we know, they're just gathering information as to what that amount will be. This is a couple of the pending grants. We have a Human Trafficking Awareness and Public Safety Initiative grant, as well as an Integrated Mobility Innovation grant that we are partners with several other agencies. There's a current opportunity that our staff is looking into at this point. We're working with a couple of our departments just to see if we can come up with something that would be beneficial to HART, that we can have a quick turnaround for this particular grant. We sat in on a webinar on December 3rd and gathered the information. So now it's just, we're kind of on a fact-finding mission at this point to figure out, where do we go from here and if it's something that we can work with. And these are upcoming grants. Your next two slides are just upcoming grants, things that HART has filed in the past, things that we will be looking to file as we move forward into January and that first quarter of 2020. Any specific questions or comments?
I do have a question, thank you. In terms of the grant we got for the buses, for the CNG, would that have been possible to apply for electric buses?
I'm not sure what the grant specifications were.
Good morning. For the record, Cindy Siglich, interim CFO for HART. So yes, it would have been possible. We had, right around the same time was the Low-No opportunity. In that opportunity, we applied for the electric buses. So we took this grant as the opportunity to replace our diesels.
Thank you. Have we heard back from the Low-No? Do we not get it, or?
We did not get that.
I couldn't remember. Okay, and that opportunity will come again?
Yes, it comes every year.
Okay.
Well, it has been coming every year.
Right.
So we would anticipate that would come. They're both 5339 grants, so they come about the same time every year.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. It's about the CSX and the fact that the board unanimously voted here. I just wanted to start to understand in terms of the legislature. I know they're not very supportive of moving in this direction, but it's still a direction that we voted on, that the MPO has voted unanimously for, that the TMA has supported unanimously. And I'm just wondering, in terms of getting that on our legislative agenda, at least to break the ice here and start to make sure that our legislators know that that is a direction that we want to move in.
Okay, I will make a note of that and make sure that we have those conversations.
Thank you.
Question for you, though. Does that have to go to the full board for approval, though, as we go up to talk to CSX on behalf of HART?
Well, I think we don't need to, we don't have anything to bring them except for the fact, I think it should be, we did vote unanimously to pursue negotiations with HART.
We as a board or we
Yeah.
as a committee?
No, we as a board did, yeah. And as I said, also the MPO and the TMA. So, I'd like to see at least that, we don't have a specific proposal now, but I'd really like to I think the legislature, for the most part, when I talk to them, have no idea and haven't been approached in terms of the growing interest in this and the intent to move in that direction. So, thanks.
I realize we're going to have a...
I don't think your mic is on, Commissioner Overland.
No, it is. Thank you. I realize we're going to have an update on the CSX conversation, but and where we are in that process after this presentation. But to the chair's point, actually, even at TMA, when we did and were successful at getting HART's as a sponsoring agency's CSX negotiation process on the priority list, there was some hesitation because there was no understanding, or we had not communicated what we're trying to do. And so I appreciate that we're going to have the presentation later, but I do think that we don't have any time to waste on this. If the surtax holds and the percentage of towards fixed guideway holds, this is a perfect project to move on not only a local but a regional basis. And so while we've had pushback on the concept of using rail as an asset, as a transit asset for our citizens in the past, I'm here because I want that to change. And I will push it. I've spoken to several legislators over the last decade that I'm coming on this issue. And so I think it's important that we start that conversation as soon as possible. At the last leadership and policy meeting, I had made a recommendation that all of our board members be trained on how to utilize the American Public Transit Administration's database that includes details on each of our legislators' districts and where jobs lie that are related to transit, so that we, as board members, which one of our primary roles as board members for HART, as well as this particular committee, are charged with advocating on behalf of the agency. And so, one, I am so glad you're in the seat you're in, Ms. Hardwick, because your leadership there will be really helpful. But it doesn't relieve our board of any of the responsibility to be true advocates on the behalf of HART. As I indicated last month, HART is an amazing organization. We are celebrated around the country for the amazing amount of work that we've been able to accomplish with the pennies we've had to do it with. And that should be not only celebrated by our boards to our legislators, but also to make sure that we have the tools and training to be effective when we go to Tallahassee. Opening day is January 14th of the session. Hillsborough Day is the day after that. We have a board meeting before then, and I would ask that we recommend that on the January agenda, that we have at least a short presentation on what tools are available, and then maybe in our briefings, we can actually go through how to use them so that we can be best prepared when we go to Tallahassee. I mentioned it at the last meeting, but I didn't see it on our last agenda, but I think it's critically important that we get ready. Because the conversation at the TMA meeting was, the reason we had some urgency getting it on the priority list is so that those in our region, as they learn more about what we're doing, but even still, as we prepare for going to Tallahassee for this session, we don't have to wait a whole year before we bring it up. And so I'm going to ask that we, add that to the January agenda. And if you can help with making sure board members are best prepared. But again, to reiterate the importance of bringing CSX up in the legislative platform in Tallahassee this year. So, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's sort of the lines I was moving towards when I asked had it been approved by the full board. I may have missed that board meeting. One of the things that I'm key on is making sure we talk as a uniform voice. I like that session you're talking about, but I think we need to go just a little bit further. As we engage with legislative arm, if you will, we should have talking points. And so everybody should be coming off with the same idea as opposed to varying thoughts behind it. So as you craft your language, I think that needs to be shared with the board so the board understands that too. And we go there with one uniform voice. So if Commissioner Kemp mentions it, Commissioner Overman mentions it, I mention it, it's all the same. So we don't look like we're going in different directions. That's why I mentioned that, and I think we need to standardize that across the board.
And for the record, just because it seems to have been lost, in March 2019, this was voted unanimously by the HART Board to pursue CSX. Also, I guess I just have a quick question about the radio communications. This is basically to replace a system we have now that has aged out or is aging out?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have an update on the CSX evaluation for high-capacity transit.
Good morning. Chris Cochran, Director of Service Development. I believe all of you should have in front of you the report summary from Mr. Charles Banks, who came and spoke before the board a few months ago, having an opportunity to discuss with you all what goes into one of these projects, exactly what kind of challenges we all might expect in pursuing this project and helping prepare for the future of the CSX opportunity. I would direct you to page 2 on kind of the next steps in helping you understand where we are and what the expectations will be. We currently have $100,000 funded in the IOC program of projects that has been approved at this point in time. Pending the outcome of the Supreme Court case, that money's prepared to be spent on these next 4 focus steps in doing some further evaluation of the CSX project, and that involves some initial beginning to meet and speak with CSX representatives, taking a more of a deep dive into some of the previous studies and documenting them, seeing what is going to be needed in order to update them. Obviously, the last one was that was completed. The full study, I want to say, was in the mid-2000s, early 2000s?
2012.
Was it 12? Okay, yeah.
Well,
So-
it was a draft study that was released, but never a substantially full study.
Okay, so from my understanding with Ms. Alden at the MPO, there was a study that was done many years ago at this point, actually resulted in a categorical exclusion to move forward with the project. However, in doing some kind of asking around and a little bit of investigation into it's been so long since that was done, we would really have to do a full study over again. So looking at this $100,000 that we have in the IOC is really preparing us and setting us up to ensure that the next study that we do, everything is set in place to do it appropriately. We know exactly what it is that we're going to need, how much of the previous studies that we can leverage. They would look at performing a very high-level assessment of the existing railroad facilities in the area that we are interested in looking at, as well as doing some very high-level conceptualized planning and operating alternatives. So that is where we are in our expectations of being able to move forward with a study that would be funded out of the IOC program of projects. Now, we are obviously committed to doing something if we're able to find another way to fund that. If we can't, if that does not happen, then certainly we have some guidelines here that can help us move forward in it in that regards, regardless of what happens with the funding. So,
Well, I would say just in terms of the IOC or the sales tax money, $100,000 that's been put forward is de minimis, as we've discussed here before, so that, I mean, even our budget as stands, and not to say I'm not extremely worried about a lot of things, but in terms of our budget, but that, I think, 100,000 would, we would be able to do with our current budget. I would expect that if the sales tax comes through, we should, as we've noted before, be able to increase that significantly. I would also think that we should have Beth Alden here, since she knows more about everything that's been done in the background and history of the, it's been a long time and certainly has, off the top of her head, she can speak to everything that's been done with that, with surety. I've been working with her on this, and I think it would be really good to have her for a presentation, since she's been part of this for such a long time.
certainly, we'd be happy to help set that up and have her come in and speak more about it.
That would be good, I think.
Question?
Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for this information. As Commissioner Kemp mentioned, this was discussed in March of last year, and then we had a meeting, on September 9th, which is great. And then we had the joint workshop with the MPO and HART. And what I am wanting to know is, at that workshop, there was a clear discovery, I guess is probably the best way to put it, that the presenter that did that presentation indicated who was at the table on transit projects. MPO, FDOT, and HART. And forgot to mention that the county needs to be at the table too. Which I found really interesting, because in the presentation, it made it very clear that part of the planning of a project of this magnitude, for example, depending on whether we do a scaled-down version where we just address the corridors, for example, between USF and downtown, or other corridors, but not the whole county as a whole in terms of the negotiation. So in the process of whatever studies we've done so far, I'm trying to figure out, in the illustration that was used that said, here's the planning process. This is the plan you have to have. These are the key elements that need to be included in that plan for not only our funding levels, but where we are able to create a multiplier effect by qualifying for state and federal funds. Because a project of this scope is not small, depending on whether or not we buy the lines, lease the lines, run alongside the lines, just work with right-of-way, how we actually address the transportation challenges and create true mobility on a regional basis, but primarily to address the needs of all of our citizens in Hillsborough County. This is a huge resource that we need to capitalize on, in my opinion. And I'm just curious, based on, did you attend that joint workshop?
I did, yes.
Okay. So where in the process of that timeline that he described, whether it be under 300 million or over 300 million, would you suggest this lies? Or are we just taking a tangent and not working along a plan in order to get this funded long-term?
Well, I have to be honest, I'm really not comfortable in stating whether it's going to be a new starts or a small starts project. That's not I mean, that's part of what a study is going to determine. I think it would likely be more than 300 million, but please, that is not a factual quote that I want to put out there, that we start counting and betting on. Rail projects are huge projects, obviously. So my guess is it's going to be, it would be a New Starts program, and certainly, that's going to involve all the partners, MPO, county, HART, city, and regional partners as well need to be at the table in understanding how it's going to impact future regional connections if we don't approach it on a regional level initially. So
That's sort of my point. I wear a lot of hats right now, and we're talking about moving, when we were talking about appointments and committees, in 2020, it appears as though the Transit-Oriented Development Ad Hoc Committee is going to roll up into this one. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay. Yes. Which makes sense to me, because as the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board for Hillsborough County, and the bonus points you get when you link transportation disadvantaged as well as affordable housing to a transit plan, I'm very interested in where we are with this. Because I do want to address those two efforts in concert with this one as well. So I'm glad to see that. But I'm looking forward to revisiting the studies and having Ms. Alden come and help us understand what pieces we have and what pieces we need as we move forward to determine the scope of this project. Thank you.
Chris, and I apologize, I haven't looked at the 2012 study, but did I hear you correctly in that it was rejected going forward with CXX in 2012?
Gosh, I apologize. I was not here at HART at the time. Ruthie's not here.
Actually, no, that's, if that was the point that was made, is it, when you said, when it was the information that he said categorical exclusion?
Correct.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So as part of these large-scale PD&E projects, we, you have to do some NEPA and environmental pieces. What a categorical exclusion you can apply for that essentially allows you to get some, you're excluded from having to meet certain environmental.
So in other words, it's an
Gotcha.
acceptance rather than
That-
it eliminates a step.
But that was prior to the 2012 study. That was even before that.
Yeah, that was like
Okay.
in the late 90s that had been done, because this has been being worked on forever. And that's why it's important, I think.
That's what I was referring to originally. So,
And that's why I think it's important to have Beth Alden, because she really has all this nailed down. And the study that was there, I'm thinking 2012. I could be wrong, but I think 2012. And that actually showed the things that the recent regional study, they did not include. They said that they did USF to downtown, but they actually did Nebraska Avenue at Fowler to downtown and excluded USF, which brought into the process 43,000 students and 25,000 jobs. And they happened to eliminate the leg. They kept calling it USF, but it actually went to Nebraska and Fowler, rather. And that's what was done as compared to the interstate, which I think was really disingenuous, actually, in terms of any serious study. So, so the 2012 study gives much better information in terms of that. And,
Okay.
but I think it was AECom that did it, and at some point, for whatever reasons, it was stopped.
Right. Okay. All right. Second question for you. $100,000 to do the study through the IOC was approved. Am I correct?
Yes,
Right.
sir.
To get any additional funding through the IOC, to use IOC funding, we would have to go back in for another approval. Is that correct? Okay.
But it's not a yearly basis.
Right.
And if we had the IOC funding, we may just be able to take that from general funds too.
Yeah, well, as Commissioner Overman mentioned, there's more folks at
Oh,
this
that's true.
table than just HART. And we do have a county, which has a county budget also. So just let's keep that in mind as we go through. And we're getting well ahead of the game with the budget conversation here, but just so we know that, IOC funding requires approval through the IOC. Or I should say referendum funding requires approval through the IOC.
Actually, that's no longer true at this point, but
It requires review by the IOC.
yes.
It's my understanding every quarter we have an opportunity, we would have that opportunity, if I understand it correctly. If it was approved by the board, we would have a quarterly opportunity to go in and get it.
Yeah, quarterly review, I believe we have that opportunity, yes. Okay, thank you.
And finally, just regards to this, this is more a general comment, that we did vote as a board also. Wasn't unanimous, but it was close to go out and see Sunrail and bring a group out there. And I haven't heard any update. I understand what the difficulties are.
We discussed at our staff meeting, we're working on that, and Lena will have a report on that at the board meeting, correct, Lena? But she has a prepared report. She's been working for the board meeting for that to happen, so it's going to happen. It's been worked on.
Yes, good morning. So that motion was made back in June, and since then, we've been working on logistics of this trip. It seems to be challenging because of the big group, because MPO also requested to join the group. And we are very close to finalizing the details, but we are actively working on this. The details will be forthcoming.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great, that's good news. Thank you very much. I think it's real important for us to move there.
Just one more comment as it relates to the CSX project. To your point about, Mr. McLean, your point about the funding and how that works, given there is four parties at the table, I could see having 4 different sources or an MOU with the other parties to make this move in the event that we have a hiccup on the funding side with the IOC or the surtax. Because I think this is a regional significant project, even if it just stays in Hillsborough as a starter. I think it does have regional significance, and it will take all 4 parties that were referenced in that training to come to the table and make it work, so.
And I appreciate that. You said that better than I did. My main point is I don't want anybody to just go out there and assume we're going to absorb those costs out there, because it is a regional project. It does support a vast amount of our constituents, if we will. And so I think it does need to be looked at as a whole. So.
Can I just, because I'm not sure about the conversation here, but there is a significant amount of that money, if the sales tax money comes through, that is allocated to only fixed guideway, which right now, the only project that we have, possibly, well, 2 projects actually, Ferry is fixed guideway and CSX is fixed guideway. We have 0 else. We have our, streetcar, but that's not even fixed guideway since it's in mixed traffic right now. So I'm not sure for how long, or it's fixed guideway, but it's in mixed traffic. It's not a dedicated corridor. So I'm looking at that, but the other thing is we would have significant funding in there, and I think the expectation would be that would be the funding. And if we applied federally, it would also be a 50%, although it's going down now. I know it's changing, 40%, whatever, federal match. And usually half the local match is provided by FDOT. So and that is a formula that was used most recently, just 5 years ago. Actually, it was more generous than that at Sunrail in Orlando, because there they don't even have a sales tax, and the local money was done on a state loan. And they, it went through significant jurisdictions there. But, I think the funding piece of it, at least in terms of capital, is not really a significant issue, especially as it goes to just doing the review and study or whatever it is that we need to move this forward. That is de minimis. I don't worry all that much about the capital a lot of times because that is not the issue as much as the operating, which we rarely seem to talk about. And that's more the long-term concern, I think.
I think as you said, ferry is a consideration at this point, CSX. We do have the BRT project, although the current planning study is funded by DOT, but there will come a point where we will have to take it further if we want to. And of course, any future BRT. As I understand it, the streetcar project is, not as I understand it, that we have the streetcar in that bucket as well if it is a project that we move forward with. So those are really the four big ones.
When you say the BRT, you mean,
The Florida, Nebraska.
right, which is
one at this point in
seemingly
time.
far away from,
It is far away, yes.
okay. Okay, I know, any further discussion? It looks like we are at the, thank you. Okay, we have any old business? New business? We stand adjourned.